But first, today is, as you know, the second anniversary of the October 7 atrocity, when some 1,200 Israelis were butchered where they danced, in their cars as they tried to flee, in their homes, in their beds, even in their cradles. Men, women and children. Women raped, the unborn shot in their mother's womb, the elderly forced to witness scenes of the horror that they, as survivors of an earlier genocide, had thought was consigned to history. And those not slaughtered where they stood were taken hostage. Some 200 stolen away on the back of trucks and on motorbikes, and down into the tunnels they went in the Hamas-controlled hellholes of Gaza. Some have been released, many murdered, including children, strangled with their bare hands by barbaric Islamists. And still tonight there's believed to be some 20 remaining hostages alive. 730 days and nights of terror that most of us hope never to even comprehend, let alone live through. And it is for them I pray tonight as we mark this day of great sadness. In any decent and reasonable world, at almost every other time in our modern history, there would have been an incessant cry from the lips of all Australians: release the hostages. Instead, across this country and much of the wider world, there's been an incessant campaign against Israel. And that's given licence to some to then turn their anti-Israel anger into anti-Jewish hate, and that's rewarded terrorism now with the recognition of Palestine.
This conflict, Australia has supported calls for a ceasefire because every innocent life matters. Every Israeli life, every Palestinian life. Right now, Gaza is in the grip of a humanitarian catastrophe, and the Israeli government must accept its share of responsibility.
Instead of blaming Israel for the suffering of the people of Gaza by their own elected Hamas government, where is the blame for the terrorists and their billionaire leaders living in Doha? Where is the accountability from the United Nations for the hundreds of billions of dollars that the world has given in aid to Gaza that's largely been spent on tunnels and other military infrastructure? Why is it Israel's fault that Hamas have deliberately placed their terrorist infrastructure in schools and hospitals and used their own people as human shields? Why is it Israel's fault that neither Egypt or Jordan or Saudi Arabia or Qatar or the UAE have taken in any of their fellow Muslim neighbours claiming asylum? Honestly, there have been hundreds of thousands of people killed in Syria over the past decade, hundreds of thousands in Sudan and in Yemen too, and thousands of Christians just this year killed by Islamists in places like Nigeria. And yet there the world hardly notices. But when the Israelis are involved, when Jews are involved, they want to march in the streets and try and mask their anti-Semitism under a grubby keffiyeh of mock outrage. Today, some pro-terror supporters amongst us marked the second anniversary of the world's worst violence against Jews since the Holocaust with this obscene graffiti in Melbourne. Directly across the road from the office of Victorian Senator Lydia Thorpe, here it is. And on the streets too, not so far away, a crude pro-Hamas billboard that appeared at a busy Melbourne intersection. And as we've all grown tired of hearing, Labor leaders said that they stood with Jewish Australians. That it was, said the Prime Minister, abhorrent. And that the people responsible, he says, must face the full force of the law. But 2 years on, those words are now just so hollow. Even if caught and even if prosecuted, what would these terrorism supporters even get? Maybe a fine worth a few $100s, maybe a community service order if they're lucky. The real problem is that not once since the October 7 atrocity have our governments at any level taken serious action to crack down on the countless instances of open Jew hatred. Starting with that night of great infamy on October 9 at the Opera House in Sydney, when an enraged mob shouted obscenities against Jewish Australians. That was October 9, at least 2 weeks before the Israeli army had taken any action at all against Gaza itself, because it was still trying to come to terms with and deal with a terrorist incursion into Israel. Almost the instant that news broke of the October 7 atrocities, local Islamist preachers here in Australia were out there on the streets celebrating the slaughter of Jews.
I'm smiling and I'm happy. I'm elated. It's a day of courage.
Ask yourself this, what action's been taken against those preachers of hate? Well, virtually nothing. How many of them have been deported? How many have had their visas cancelled? Not one that I am aware. Since then, almost every weekend in Sydney and Melbourne, there's been intimidatory marches that paralyse our city streets as an angry mob blames Jewish people for a so-called genocide, even though the war would stop immediately if only Hamas would release the hostages. Outside of Israel, Melbourne is home to more Holocaust survivors than almost any other city on earth. Australia was once a haven for Jewish people, a place where long before the left lectured us about diversity, the good people of this country elected Jews to our parliament, that we had a Jewish Governor-General, very proudly too a Jewish military leader, Sir John Monash, who was knighted on the battlefield in the Great War for his service not only to Australia, but the cause of the Allies. And yet here we are today, or I should say, here are some of us. Because I want to believe that more of us are like we once were and not infected with this current poison of anti-Jewish hatred. If you want to understand why Jewish Australians live with the fear that they do, you must understand this. They are the people from the families who said at one time in their history, we must flee. They are the ones who fled and survived. And their family trees today have empty branches with those in their family ended, because those in their family stayed. Now, no longer are these protests the exercise of free speech. They are now plainly the public expression of an orchestrated campaign of vilification against Jewish Australians. And if our laws against hate speech, against racial discrimination are to mean anything, these protests must stop. At the very least, they must not be able to co-opt our national icons like the Sydney Opera House or the Harbour Bridge to their cause, because that by design is there to ensure that the images go around the world and send a message that somehow Australia is supportive of this hate, when most of us are fed up, we're angry, and by God, we're ashamed that this is happening in our country, and our elected leaders and our officialdom seem so impotent. Or are they impotent? Or are they like Pontius Pilate, quietly washing their hands of this hate? Because it wasn't so long ago that they could do this to crack down on a mere virus.
Media! Media! Media!
They're throwing stuff now, and okay, they're shooting. They're now shooting. Oh!
What's happening in the West must be tackled, and tackled quickly, or we will lose our tolerant culture and we will never get it back. And yes, we need determined voters to speak up, and we need our governments to grow a spine or we throw them out. But we also need Muslims who live in the West, who say they are moderate, who say they want peace, to demand the change. Because let's be honest here with each other. It wasn't Jews who flew planes into the World Trade Center and killed almost 3,000 Americans. It wasn't Christian suicide bombers in 2005 who blew up the London Underground and killed 52. It isn't Buddhists that have murdered 7,000 Christians in Nigeria this year alone. or cut the throats of priests saying Mass in France, or murdered journalists over a cartoon, or who blew up trains and hotels in Mumbai, killing 209, or abducted schoolgirls because females getting an education so offended Boko Haram. It wasn't Christians who killed some 800 Yazidis in a Sunni Muslim bombing raid, or burned alive a Jordanian pilot in his Islamic State cage, or beheaded the journalist Daniel Pearl live on camera, or stormed the Bataclan disco in Paris, shooting dead 90 in 2015, or shot 300 school kids in Beslan in Russia, or have blown up embassies and planes all around the world. Or, as we know ourselves here in Australia, bombed nightclubs in Bali, killing 202, and as we know, 88 of our own. Or in countless countries around the world, killed in cold blood, many of the same adherents to their faith, particularly women and children. Radical Islamism is the challenge of our times. It is the challenge of our times. And we need to be honest about that if we're to have any chance of defeating it. Because you cannot beat an enemy you're too scared to even name. And we must defeat it before there is nothing left to even defend. Before it is too late.